Hey guys, Voxide here. So the new Suicide Squad trailer came out and of course the movie looks awesome, but what was interesting to me as a motion designer was actually the title sequences in between the shots. So more specifically I'm talking about this part right here, for example, at the end. So this shot right here, you can see it's like really colorful and just overall a nice piece of motion design. So I thought I would just hop over After Effects and try to recreate the scene, and well, while it's not exactly the same, I think it's a pretty close result, and let me show you guys what I did. So this is how it looks. As you can see, it's pretty close. The titles look pretty much the same, just the background is a little different, and maybe some of the particles in the background. But anyway, I thought I would make a tutorial about this because I've actually used a lot of interesting techniques to achieve this result, and I thought maybe why not share it with you guys, and maybe you learn something you already didn't know before. So just as a heads up, we will be using Trapcode Particular and Element 3D for this project, so make sure you have those plugins installed. Alright, so let's just start. I'll make a new project and I'll make a new composition and just make this HD. And for the duration I will actually use 150 frames, which is around 5 seconds, with a frame rate of 30. Hit OK, and let's just start by making a new background layer. So I will add a solid and name this background 1. I will name this background 1 because we will be duplicating this layer a lot. So hit OK, and I will add effect. I will go to generate for color gradient and let's edit this ramp a bit. So in the original trailer we had pink over in this color, and we had desaturated blue over in this corner. We had sort of a desaturated green in this corner, and we had another light blue. Oh, sorry. So grab the yellow color and make this just sort of a pale blue. And now we can blend these colors together, just so it's a little more faded. The colors are fading into each other better, and this is a good start. We can always just go back and re-edit this as needed. So in order to populate this scene with clouds, I've actually used Trapcode Particular for this. So I will make a new layer. Sorry, select my composition, make a new solid. I will name this Particular Clouds 1. So in the project that I showed you, I used actually 2 layers of clouds. So this is gonna be layer number 1. And here's basically what we want to do is just populate the scene with particles, and then set a custom texture for each particle to a cloud texture. So first off, let me just add the particular effect to the layer. Alright, so here you have it, and if I scrub my timeline, this is the default look particular has. So now if I go in my emitter, and the emitter type I will set to box, and increase the size X, Y and Z for the emitter size, just so it fits the whole screen. And for emission extras, so what this does basically, if I set this value to 100, now if I go in my first frame, you can see the scene is already populated. So if this is by default 0, and now you can see the particles just show up over time, but I want the particles already to be on the screen starting from frame 0. So I will set this to 100, and now the particles are already on the screen. But you can see the particles are moving, and I actually don't want that. So a quick fix for this is, if I go in my physics tab, I can set a keyframe for physics time factor at frame 0, and then I will move 1 frame in advance, and I will set this to 0. Oh, sorry, so the physics time factor was at 1, so at frame 0 we have physics time factor, we have a value of 1, and then 1 frame after that we have a value of 0, so this will just freeze my particles into space. And you can see, like, the very first frame they just move a bit and then they freeze, so we can just offset this particular layer 1 frame behind, so they start off frozen right from the very first frame of the composition. So I will just increase this particular length to an extra frame, so just so it matches the end of the composition. And let's see how we can set up the texture for the cloud. So in my original project I've actually used, if you go do a Google search for cloud PNG, so just cloud PNG, you have a lot of options from which you can choose. In my original project I've actually used this clip and this other guy, so let me just import those. I will double click in my project window and let's see where I had those. Let me just search for C Cloud. So it's this guy and this other guy, these two that are so this guy and this other guy. So I will import those, and now let's make a new composition, and I will name this composition Cloud Texture 1. I will set the width and height to be 250 by 150. Press enter, and now I will drop my first cloud image, and you can see it's way bigger than the composition width and height. So what I can do is select my layer and press S on my keyboard. This will give me the scale properties, and now I can decrease the scale for this layer just until it sort of matches the boundaries of our composition. And now if I go back in my comp 1, I need to import our new cloud texture composition inside our main composition, like so. Just drag and drop, and we won't need to see this composition, so I will shut off visibility for this layer. And now in our particular clouds, I can go to effects, particular, and I will go in my particle settings, and for particle type I can choose now sprite. And if I go in my texture tab, I can set it to the first layer, so this is our cloud texture 1 composition. And right off the bat you can see it worked, but the size is too small, so I will just increase the size, and now you can see sort of the result we're getting. So I will just increase the size a bit, and actually we don't need 100 particles. In my original example I've used like 35 maybe. And let's randomize the particles a bit. So I will increase the size random, I will drop down the opacity. I will actually set the transfer mode for the particle to screen, just so they fade into each other better. And while we're on this subject, let me just set the particular clouds 1 layer to screen, so it fades better into the background. And decrease the opacity a bit, increase the opacity random, just randomize sorry, you get a better effect if you just randomize the particle settings. So opacity random and size random. You should definitely play around with these settings until you get something that looks good. Another thing you can do is randomize the rotation. So if I go in my rotation tab and you go to your random rotation, you can increase the random rotation just a bit, not that much, maybe a value of 2. Let's see what else we have. Let's increase the scale even more, and I think this is of course we will need to edit this even more, but this is a good result for now. And for our second particular clouds layer, we can just duplicate this. So while having this layer selected, you can press Ctrl D on your keyboard. This will duplicate the layer, and I will give this layer different random seed. So in your emitter tab, just go to random seed, and here you can choose a different random seed. So what this does, let me just solo this layer. What this does is it just repositions the particles in space in a different position. So this looks fine, and let's make our second texture for the second particular layer. So let's make a new composition. This will be cloud texture 2. Leave it with the same settings, hit OK, and drag and drop my second cloud layer. And again, we will have to rescale this layer just so it's inside the boundaries, like so. And now back in our original comp, we can drag and drop our cloud texture layer 2. We don't need to see this, so turn off visibility. And now in our second particular clouds layer, so rename this to clouds 2, we go in our particular settings, and here in our particle group we can go to our texture and set this to be cloud texture 2. So now it's updated with the new texture, which is what we want. And now if I unsolo this, you can see the second particular clouds layer overlays on top of the first one, like so. And of course now we can choose a different seed for this, and we can just try to get an interesting result. We can check out to see maybe increasing the scale will help for the second layer. I can also solo this layer just so I see exactly what's happening. So maybe something like this. Maybe not so many particles. Let's use 25 in this case, and unsolo this. And this is a good starting point for our background as far as that goes. And let's see what else we can do. So we want our clouds to be faded right here in the center and around the border. So an easy way to do this, we can just duplicate our background layer. So with your layer selected, just press Ctrl D and put this on top. And now I can just simply make a mask around the border here, like so. And if I press M on my keyboard, I can access the mask properties, and for this I will set this to subtract and increase the feather and turn off the mask over here in the viewport. And you can see this is the effect that it now gives us. So before we had our background layer on top of this, it looks like this, and now with the background it looks like this, which is the effect we're going for. And also we need another mask right here in the center, so the clouds aren't as opaque right here in the center, so we can differentiate between the background and the text better. So to achieve this effect, you can just duplicate the layer again, drag this on top, and for this layer I will just make a mask around the center. And the same thing here, just if I press with my layer selected, I press F, we can access our mask feather, and I will just feather this now and maybe even increase it a little. So this is pretty much the process that I used to achieve the background from my original process of project. Of course, in the original trailer, they probably used volumetric clouds to achieve this sort of volumetric look. So you can see there actually the clouds here have more depth to them, and they're a little thicker, but you know, that would take a lot of time, and it's easier to just kind of fake the effect they went for. And if I press T, this will give me my background opacity. I can just decrease this a bit, maybe use 80, a value of 80 for this layer. And let's see what else we can do. We can now add an adjustment layer to this. So if I add an adjustment layer, and let's say I want the top part right over here, this part, I want it to be darker. So in order to do this, with my adjustment layer selected, I can grab my pen tool and then just make a nice mask around this part here at the top, like so. And for this layer I will add effect color correction curves, and I will drop the RGB value so you can see how this affects it right here. And actually we can set the adjustment layer to multiply, and this will affect the colors better. This will fade into the background a little better. And now if I press F on the keyboard, we can increase the feather of this mask and just sort of achieve a more interesting look. And we can also add another, so on the same adjustment layer I will add another mask right over here on this corner and right over here on this corner as well, and select both these masks and press F 2 times and just increase their feather value like so. So this is I'm actually pretty satisfied with this effect. Actually, I don't want the adjustment layer to be affecting this corner that much. I actually like it over here, but I don't want this corner to be affected this much. So what I can do is go to my mask. You can see by selecting the mask here, you can see the highlights mask too. And what you can do now is go in the mask opacity options and just drop the opacity down, and you can see now it doesn't affect it as much. So the other masks have 100% opacity, and this mask too will have only 55, just so it doesn't have like a really dark spot over here, and so it flows better with the composition. Something else we can do is add a new, so this will be our this is called a vignette. I'm not sure how you pronounce this, but it's called a vignette effect. So this is going to be our vignette. No idea how to pronounce it, so sorry. And just name this or whatever. Dark edges, this is way easier. Now I will just add a new adjustment layer. This is gonna be our color correction background. And now for this I can go to my effect, use curves, and just increase the contrast a bit. Just give it a nicer look, and maybe even increase the, if I go to my red value and grab the higher tones, maybe I can just increase, add more of red to the whole composition. Alright, so this is good for the background and the clouds and all that stuff. You can always go and just readjust the particles for the clouds. Like for example, let's say for the particle clouds 1, I want to make them a little higher scale or even lower, and you can just play with random seeds. You can see a different value gives you way different results. So you can mess with that until you get something that looks good. Just undo that for now. Alright, so let's see for the next part. Let's add these particles right over here. So you can see like there are some particles that fly around in the scene that have interesting shapes. Like you can see there's a star here, there's like a small there's a heart, and all sorts of squares and stuff. Let's see how we can do this. So now we will achieve this effect by using particular again. So if I go in my layer, add a new layer, solid, and let's name this particular shapes, or actually, yeah, let's just name it particular shapes. Alright, so before we give them the texture, so before we make them look like squares or whatever shapes there are, let's set up their motion. So let's add a particular first, and let's do the same thing. Let's make it a box, and let's make it full screen so it fits the whole screen. Let's set the emission extras to 100, and in this case I actually want them to move, well, not that much, so we can set the, let's set the velocity to 15, and the velocity random to 0, velocity distribution to 0, and velocity from motion to 0. So now they just pretty much have just some basic motion to them. Let's make this just a bit bigger, the emitter size I mean. Alright, and let's animate them sort of like they're coming towards the screen. So in order to do this, we can go in our physics tab, we can go to air, and we can give it a negative value to our wind z. So by doing this, you can see now they are flying towards the screen. Let me just make a fast RAM preview. Maybe we want them to be faster, so increase the wind z value. So maybe something like this. This should work. Let's give it a bit of turbulence also. So I will increase the effect position value over here, maybe something like this. Let's drop the evolution speed to 15, and let's drop the scale to 4. So now the motion has a little more variety to it, and it's just a little more of an interesting effect, which is what we want. So let's see what else we have to change here. Actually, let's make 2 layers from this. So this is going to be particular shapes, and I will duplicate this layer, and the layer below it I'm just going to name it to particular spheres, and I will I will just solo this particular sphere layer, which we're gonna work on now. So in this case, I just want them to, I don't want to give them a custom texture, I just want them to be like the spheres they are now. And I will just make the size maybe smaller, maybe just give it a little more size random and opacity random, just bring the opacity down a bit. So now we have just a nice layer with just normal particles that fly towards the screen. And actually, let me just increase the wind z even more, so they're a bit faster, something like this maybe. And let's set these the color of these particles. Let's use pink, something like this, and maybe use more particles, use like 160, and make the size even smaller, 1.2. And let's see how this looks. I will set the layer to add, just so it blends with the background. I think this is fine. Maybe we can even increase the scale. We will probably go back to this layer and edit this as needed. So now for our particular shapes layer, let me just solo this. This is the layer we're gonna use to generate our shapes. And let me just use a different random seed for this. So just use another value for our random seed. And now let's see how we can generate the shapes. So in order to do this, we will use sort of the same technique with just a little twist to it. So here's what we have to do: make a new composition. I will name this particular shape textures. And so here's the thing: we want to make, let's say I will set the particular layer to cycle between 5 different shapes and generate our particles based off of those 5 textures. So I will set the duration in the composition to be 5 frames, right? And let's make the width and height to 100 and 100, and hit OK. So now we have 5 frames in this composition. So each frame is going to represent a different shape. I will show you what I mean. I will make a new solid layer, make this white, and I will set this solid to be just 1 frame long. And I will you can edit this shape however you want, but in this example I will keep it simple. I will just add a mask, so double click this to add a mask, and here you can see the mask. I will make the mask smaller and set it to subtract. So now we have like a sort of a stroked out rectangle shape. We can also make, in the original clip we saw like a star shape. Let me just set the fill. We can make like a nice star shape. And if I go in my polystar options, let's see what options we have here. let's set up the inner radius first of all. So maybe something like this. And now here is the very important part. We have to make this second layer, we'll also make it one frame long. So we have our first layer on the first frame, we have our second layer on the second frame, and so on. We're gonna maintain this organization throughout the whole composition. So let's make our third shape. Let's make maybe let's make a new layer, solid, okay, and let's make this one frame long and place it after our star shape. And I will double click this ellipse tool. This will add an ellipse mask. Just adjust this. I can duplicate this mask and set this to subtract, and now I can rescale this just so it we are kind of making the same thing we did with a rectangle, only using a shape sorry, a shape a circle shape, sorry, don't know where my head's at. Alright, so let's see our fourth shape. What else can we make? In the original this was an interesting shape to me, like the 4 squares, so let's make that. Make a new solid, and let's make this be our fourth frame, and go to effect, and you can use generate, and we're gonna use a grid, and I will set the grid to width slider and increase the width. And now I can set the invert grid. I will check this, and now you can see we have this shape over here. Alright, and let's make the border, maybe increase the border size, and let's make a new solid for our last shape. And I'm just gonna make a triangle mask here, just a silly little triangle. It should be fine, right? So I have 5 shapes, each is one frame, and they're ordered sequentially. Alright, so this is how your texture composition should be. And now back in our main composition, we can drop our particular shape layers. You can see it's right over here, 5 frames long. We don't need to see this, so we'll just turn off visibility. And now in our particular shape layer, if I go to particle type, I will set this to textured polygon, sorry, actually texture polygon colorized, because we want to use colors for this. I will set it to this, and now in our texture slot for layer we can use particular shape textures, right? And nothing's happening, probably. Oh, right, so here's the kicker, right? So we set it to particular shape textures, and for our time sampling, this is where our organization comes in handy. We will set this to split clip stretch. So this is gonna take any random frame from this composition. It's gonna take a random frame and it's gonna create a texture based off this the random frame, and it's gonna stretch it throughout the whole timeline. So now we have our layer here, and we can increase the size, maybe use a value of 8. So you can see this is the result. And let's just add, before I forget, let's just add some motion blur to this layer. So I'll set this to on and maybe increase the shutter angle a bit, just so it has some smooth animation. And let's see what else we can do. We can increase the size random, and we can increase the opacity random, and maybe these are too many particles. Actually, I'm gonna set the size to be 5. I want them a little smaller, like in the original trailer. And let's color them now. For this we can use, I will go to set color and choose random from gradient, and now in our color random, color over life, we can edit our gradient. So we'll just use this preset and just use the trailer colors, so like a pink and maybe a blue, green is good, and maybe add another pink over here. So these are pretty much the predominant colors from the trailer. I will set this layer to add, and let's see how this looks with our background. So not bad, but of course we need to add some rotation to these particles. So we use the texturized polygon instead of a sprite, so we can rotate them in 3D space. So if I go to my rotation and increase the random rotation, you can see now they're all rotating in different directions, and this is the effect then which we wanted to achieve. And maybe increase the size to 6. Alright, so this is looking alright. Maybe our velocity is too high, and also maybe our maybe we don't need so much turbulence for this, so I'm just gonna set it to 250. So this is pretty good for our background. I will actually set these 2 layers below the color adjustments, so they're affected by the effect we have over here with the darken edges and the overall color correcting of the background. Alright, now we can add our text. So I will make a new text layer, and let's see, trailer titles. I will just center this by holding Ctrl and Shift and dragging it to the center of the screen. You can snap to center by holding Ctrl and Shift. And the font that I used for my example is called Go Bold, which is available on thefont.com. And we actually don't need to see this layer, because we're gonna use this layer just to generate our element 3D layer. So we will go add a new solid and name this element, just call this element for now. Alright, and I will add effect video copilot element. In my element tabs I will set the custom layers. I will set the custom text to be our trailer titles. And now if I go in my scene setup, you can click on extrude, and now you can see this generated our 3D titles. I will hit OK there, and I will go in my group 1 and actually go to my particle look and decrease the size just so it's fit inside of the screen. So maybe something like this. And now let's set up our rotating letters animation. I will just solo this layer just so it loads faster. And now I can go in my multi-object group. I will enable this. And now what this basically does is I can, let's see if it displays the letters. You can see it takes each letter as an individual element, so which is what we want. So let's see, for rotation we need some random rotation, I think. Yeah. So let's animate our random rotation. I will start it at 0 and go to the end of my composition and just slightly rotate this around. Also I will need some Y rotation, I think. Yep, this is the one. So I will add another keyframe for the Y rotation and go to the end of my timeline and just rotate them a bit on the Y axis, like so. And let's see, we can use some scatter. In this case we will want to scatter on the Y axis. So add a keyframe here and another keyframe at the end of the composition for the Y axis. And of course you can play with this with these animations until you get your desired effect, but just for the sake of the tutorial I will leave this as it is. So let's say I'm happy with this, and we can move forward now. At this point it's alright to add a camera, I suppose. So make a layer, new camera. I will set the angle view here to maybe 60. And now in the original sorry, in the original trailer the letters, the camera was a little bit down below angle. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if I grab my camera and I grab my camera tool over here, and I will cycle through these tools by pressing C. And now we have our orbit camera tool. We can just turn the text a little bit around, just so it's we actually see the bottom of the letters, something like this. And you can see everything is 3D. This affects the clouds and the particles as well, because they are actually 3D elements. So this is alright. This is actually looking pretty good. And we can animate a nice camera zoom in now. So if I go in my camera layer, go to position, I will set a keyframe at the beginning and move to the end of the timeline and just bring it closer to the screen. And this will simply create a nice zoom in camera animation. Alright, so let's see what we can do now to set the texture here. Alright, as you can see in the original trailer, we have, well, I'm not really sure exactly how they did it, but the way I did it was I set up a custom texture for the front of the letters, and then another custom texture for the actual extrude part of the letters. So let's see what I mean by that. If I go in my element layer and I go to my scene setup, you can see this is all one object over here. But to set up a different color for the extrude part of this text, we need to set our extrusion model to have 2 bevel copies. So what this does basically is, if I select my bevel 1 color, and let's just make this another color, let's make this pink. Alright, so for our bevel 2 I will just reassign the text here. You can see they're kind of intersecting each other. So what we want is for our bevel 2 object to not have any extrude. So I will set this to 0. And now I will just bring it up front by using the Z depth. So now you can see I have a layer just for the front of it, and our second layer just for the extrude part of it. And now we can set up different textures for both of these objects. Alright, so I will hit OK here, and let's start by making the front texture, and I will hit OK, and you can see it updated in the viewport. Let's see how we can make our texture for the front of the letters. So before I do that, let me just save this in case I just lose our progress so far. So let's make a new composition and name this element front texture, right? And I will make this large texture, so 1500 by 1500 should be good, and make sure it's the entire length of your original composition. So in this case it's going to be 150 frames, so it's the same as this main composition length, and hit OK. And now this is our composition. We can add a new solid. I will name this solid fractal. And let's just add a fractal noise to this. And right off the bat, I can just increase the scale of this. So what I want to achieve basically is just a base color for our texture. So I will increase the scale here, and I will add an effect, fast blur, and just blur this out, and make sure repeat edge pixels is checked. So just increase the scale here. So this will be our base color for our front of the text. So back in our element front texture, let's see how we can. You can see in the original example we have like these little cracks over here, and we can do this by using an actual PNG image, which you can find on Google. So if you go search for cracks texture, you can see you have a lot of options over here, but actually I'm gonna show you a way how you can do it directly inside After Effects. So if I add a new layer, new solid, let's name this layer, let's name it cracks. I will show you how you can actually use fractal noise to generate the cracks. So I add a new fractal noise to the layer, And for the fractal type, choose dynamic twist. Oh, actually no, sorry, dynamic progressive. All right, and set this to invert. And now I can add a curves adjustment to this and just increase the contrast. Just make sure we're kind of having just some highlights of the fractal noise, something like this. Alright, and now if I go to effect and go to blur and sharpen and choose CC vector blur and increase the amount just a bit, you can see the fractals is sort of starting to look like cracks. And now if I go to effect channel and set this to invert and set this layer to multiply, you can see now we have cracks overlay right on top of our original fractal layer. So what's great about this is that you can do you can have a endless variation of the cracks. So for example, I want my cracks to be their scale, I want them to be bigger, so I can just increase the scale of the fractal noise. As you can see, you can also generate random values by using the evolution. You can not the rotation, the evolution. So you can see you can also animate the cracks to make a more interesting effect, and this will update in our main composition in real time. So I think it's a better technique to actually use fractal to generate your cracks than using a set in stone PNG alpha image. Alright, in the original trailers, the cracks also had a slight like a slight pink tint to them, and we can actually set the blend with original just so it's not completely pink, just so it has a slight tint to it. And also in the original trailers we can see sort of has like these blue splashes of color, and one way we can add this is again with using fractal. And now we will add a new solid and go to noise and grain, fractal noise, and let's see, I will use a tritone to color this. So I will set the tritone mid-tones to be sort of a pink, and if I set the, so this is going to be splash pink. If I set this layer now to add, for example, you can see it sort of blends in with the rest of the layers that we have. But in this case I will set the brightness to be sort of lower brightness, and I can just use fast blur on this and just play around with the settings until we have something more interesting. So increase the brightness again, maybe something like this, maybe even less. And now I can simply duplicate this layer, and this is gonna be our splash blue. We can set the tritone to be a blue color, and we can animate we can just give it a random value here so it's not right on top of our pink layer. And let's make the transform, go to transform and make the scale a little bigger, something like this, let's say. Make the brightness higher. So now we have an interesting texture we can start off with. Of course we can just always go back to our element front texture and just re-edit, readjust colors, but I think this is fine for now. So back in our main original comp, if I go in my scene setup, let's add our new material. So this is gonna be our second material, and actually before we do that we actually have to import our texture, our new texture, inside the element 3D layer. In order to do this, you can go in your element front texture. I'm just gonna drag and drop this in our scene. So I will shadow visibility for this, and in our element we can go to custom texture maps, right? And the first slot, the layer 1, I'm gonna set this to be element front texture. So nothing happens right now, but if I go in my scene setup and select our second material, you can see in our diffuse slot we now have access to our custom layer number 1, which is what we want. So we'll hit OK on this, and you can see this then applies the texture we just created to right the front of our text. And actually I want this texture to be a little bigger. So one way to do this is if I go in my bevel group right here, actually not in our bevel group, I will have to click on extrusion model, and if I go below you can see the UV repeat is set to 1 and 1, which is the actual scale of the texture we just created. So in order to increase this size we can set this to be, if I set this to be 0.25 and 0.25, this will give me, the texture will be 4 times larger, which is actually a little too large. So let's just use a value of 0.5 and 0.5. So now it's just 2 times larger than it originally was. I will hit OK here, and let's add a light for now. Let's go new layer and add a light, and this is gonna be our main light source. And I usually set up my lights when I'm using Element 3D. I usually set them up in a custom view 1. So here we can see this is actually the 3D look, how it looks in an axonometric view. Or actually I'm not sure how it's called, but that's beside the point. So I can just grab this light and maybe drag it in space and make it higher up. And now if I go back in my active camera, I can set the intensity to be maybe 120. So I want it to have more light. Alright, so I think this is good for now. Let's take care of our extrude texture, and let's make a new texture for that. I will save the project first. So let's make our extrude texture. So make composition, new composition. Let's name this element extrude texture. Same values as the previous composition, the previous texture. Sorry, I don't know why I'm having a cold or something. And let's add a new solid. This is going to be our first solid, and we're just going to use generate ramp for this, and set our black color, set it to white, and our end color, set it to sort of a pink. This should be fine, and I'll actually drag this a little bit higher, maybe something like this, and I will add a new layer, and I will add a new ramp, generate ramp, and I want to invert these colors, so white is gonna be black and black is gonna be white. And now if I set this to multiply, you can see it sort of has so without this it looks like this, and now it sort of has like it's fading towards black, towards the bottom, which is what we want. And I can actually drag the white color here so it doesn't fade as much, it doesn't affect as much the top portion of this composition. Let me just blur this a bit so it's a little more smooth. And this is fine. This is everything we have to do for our element extrude texture. So now back in our main composition, we can drop our element extrude texture, and I don't want to see this. So turn off visibility, and inside our element layer we can go to effects, and for custom texture maps we will use the second slot here, and I will add our extrude texture. And now in our scene setup, for our bevel 1 texture, we can go to diffuse and set this to be element extrude texture, right? And this is the effect. You can kind of see it's affecting it over here on this part, but it's not tiled as it should be. So let's go back in our extrude model, and let's see what we can do to fix this. If I go to my UV repeat Y value, you can kind of see I'm bringing it sort of together now. But actually if I go back in our element, so you can see it updated, in the viewport here, and this is pretty much what we want. But in the original trailers we had a white color right at the top of the letters. So if I go back in my element extrude, you can see this white part isn't affecting as much. So what we can do to make this happen, we can just bring the white down a bit, and let's see if it updates in our original. So it still doesn't affect it. Let's bring the white even down. See if it affects it now. So it's still not affecting, so there's probably something wrong with this. Let's go back in our scene and let's set this to 1 and 1. And actually if I offset this, so something's not updating as it should. Oh, it's the diffuse color, so sorry, make sure the diffuse color is set to white. Alright, so that was the this has to be set to white. I don't know why it affects it, but yeah, anyway, so set diffusion color to white, and let's, yeah, as you can see now it works, but I have to go back and readjust the white value here. Alright, so going back now, you can see we have everything's working as it should, and we have our white at the edge and the black dark at the bottom. But we don't want this to be completely dark, and one way to fix this is we can just add the new light, and I will name this bottom light, and make the color just sort of like match the pink in the scene. And I will use intensity of maybe like 30, hit OK. And now this new light, I will just place it below, just so it lights the bottom of our letters, as you can see right here. So now it lights our bottom of the letters. And let's go in our custom view, and I can actually place it right below the text, or more so below the text, and go back in my active camera. So this is pretty much the result we're going for. Maybe this is too much intensity on this light. Let's use a value of 15, something like this should be good. And for our element layer, let's minimize this, and let's add the color adjustment to this, curves, and I can just increase the contrast maybe. But actually the very front texture, this is a little bit, the scale is too low, I mean too small. So if I go in my scene setup and go in my extrusion model, we can set this back to 0.5 and 0.5. So this is better. We can use the offset to sort of bring our extrude colors, something like this. Yeah, this should be better. Alright, so now we have we can see the texture is now bigger, which is what we want, and we can raise up the brightness a bit. And of course we can always just go back in our texture and make any adjustment we want here. So for example, if I want more contrast here, or have a brighter background color, and then if I go back in my original composition, you can see this is updating, and yeah, you can go back and forth and until you find your desired look. Alright, so so far so good. We only have one thing left to do. In my original example, I've used actually some custom effects for the edges of the letters. So here's how we can do that effect. I will grab my element layer and I will duplicate this, so Control D. I'll rename this element edges, and for this layer I will solo this layer, and I don't need the curves adjustment for this. And here's what I did in the original example, right? So I want to somehow buffer out just the front part of the letters. So in order to do this, we can sort of fake it by using different materials. So for example, I will set the extrusion color, so which is this guy over here. I will set the diffuse to, I will reset this. Wait, actually, I don't want to use a diffuse texture. I will just use a diffuse color of black. So now you can see it disappeared, but it's actually completely black, as you can see if I set up, if I turn on the environment. And this is what we want. So for our front, now our front texture, I will also disable diffuse texture for this and use a value of white, like so, and hit OK here. And now this is what we have. And if I turn on transparency, you can see we actually have our extrude, but it's set to black. So now if I set this layer to add and unsolo this, you can see now it completely overlays just with the front part of our letters. So if I turn this off, you can see now how we can buffer out just the front part of our letters. And I will solo this again. And what we can do from here is, if we add an effect, stylize, and use find edges, and set the find edges to invert, you can see now we buffered out right the edges of the front of our letters. And now we can make some interesting effects with this. If I use a fractal noise and set the fractal noise to multiply, and just decrease the brightness here and increase the contrast, you can see we are getting some interesting results. And you can play around with the settings until you get something interesting. I will also decrease the scale for this, so something like this. And also I want to animate the evolution of this, so I will add a simple expression to this. You can do this by holding Alt and left click. So the expression that I'm gonna use is gonna be time multiplied by 200. So this will basically just animate the noise over time. And what else we can do? Now we can colorize this. We can use color correction, tritone, and I will set this to be blue. And we can use glow. Just make the adjust the glow threshold a bit, and I will actually duplicate this glow layer and increase the glow radius on this. And you can pretty much experiment with the settings until you get your desired look. So now if I unsolo this, you can see we sort of have like a nice glowy overlaid edges, which also animate over time, which is great, and it gives it a lot more of an interesting look to the whole effect. Let's see, if I increase the brightness of my noise, you can see how that affects it. In this case, I'm gonna leave it with a fairly low brightness. I don't want this to overshadow the effects too much, so I will leave it like that. So this is pretty much it. In the original example that I showed you, I also used just a flare over here on this part, so that's just pretty much a basic flare. So if I add a new solid, name this flare. I actually used the Video Copilot flare. I had a nice preset for this, which is this. So I will set this to 3D and then set this to add. Place it around the place. Drop the scale a bit. So this is pretty much what I used in the original example, and this is pretty much it. This is pretty much the effect. You can experiment with the values to get interesting, more nicer look. And in the original example, I also used the letterbox effect. So you can do this by just adding a black solid layer and adding a mask. So rectangle mask in this case. I just double clicked it and I will set the mask to subtract and decrease the scale like so. So this is just a fake letterbox effect. You can also just add a new final adjustment layer. So final color correction, which in the example shown earlier, I pretty much just used the tint. I used the 50% tint and curves adjustment. So I increased the contrast a little bit, maybe drop the low values and increase the high tones, and also I increased the low blue values, so it made it more bluish, and increased the high red values, so something like this. And yeah, this is pretty much it, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Maybe you learned a few things. This project will be available to download on voxsite.com, so make sure you visit our tutorial page. So if you go to my site, you can check for tutorials over here, and I will update this with this tutorial that I'm recording right now. And if you go on its page, you can see you can download each project file, which I'll make available for free. So you can download this project file directly from my site. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.